Hi, friends. It's Deanna Williston with Our Blooming Catholic Life. And I know it's been a minute between me getting sick and all the Easter celebrations, the Pope dying, and a new Pope, and some craziness going on in our neighborhood. We have not come back to our book. I've been steadfastly, I don't know about you, mentally chewing on everything we've been learning, and I'm grateful we're going to pick this up later, but inspired by our studies on the Catholic theology that's woven into the Lord of the Rings, we have this. I know one of you likes to know, do books come sealed in plastic? This one did. I can't guarantee every copy does, but this is the Simarrillion. It is illustrated by the author and edited by Christopher Tolkien. I've waited to open it so I know no more about it than you do. I wanted to open that up on camera because I know it's very important for some of you. So let's jump in here. I'm trying to open it without damaging the book. Very excited. We've held off. This was about $50. This was an investment. There are lower priced editions that don't have the illustrations. I don't even believe they have the Elven language on it. I don't know that they have the colored pages. This does tell you it's also available as an audio book. The Financial Times, oddly, says at times it rises to the greatness of true myth. The Washington Post says is a creation of singular beauty, magnificent in its best moments. The Toronto Globe and Mail says it's a grim, tragic, brooding, and beautiful book, shot through with heroism and hope. Its power is almost that of mysticism. It says here, the Similari were the three perfect jewels, fashioned by Fëanor, the most gifted of the elves, and within them was imprisoned the last light of the two trees of Valinor. But the first Dark Lord, Morgoth, stole the jewels and set them within his iron crown, guarded in the impenetrable fortress of Angband in the north of Middle-earth. Apologies for my mispronunciations. The Silmarillion is the history of the rebellion of Fëanor and his kindred against the gods, their exiles from Valinor and return to Middle-earth, and their war, hopeless despite all the heroism against the great enemy. It is the ancient drama to which the characters in The Lord of the Rings look back, in those events which some of them, such as Elrond and Galadriel, took part. The book also includes several shorter works. I do not know how I can pronounce it. Their myth of creation and the Valaquenta, the nature and powers of each of the gods, is described. In the Ak Alabeth, it recounts the downfall of the great island kingdom of Numenor at the end of the Second Age, and of the Rings of Power tells of the great events at the end of the Third Age, as narrated in The Lord of the Rings. The definitive new edition includes, by way of an introduction, a letter written by Tolkien in 1951, which provides a brilliant exposition of the earlier ages, and for the first time in history is presented with J.R.R. Tolkien's own paintings and drawings, which reveal the breathtaking grandeur and beauty of his vision of the first age of the Middle Earth. The Guardian says, how given little over half a century did one man become the creative equivalent of a people? That's a great question. There's this little card in here. I'm going to go ahead and open it up. Aha! It's a map. I have my very own map. Very interesting. I'll have to study that later. This is something that could almost be put up in a frame. It doesn't say it's on acid-free paper or anything, but that could be fun to have up in a frame. It says it's the map of the Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien. It is by the Tolkien Estate Limited, 2018. Interesting. Oh, there's something in the back too, as well. What is in the back? This is a map of Beleriand and the lands to the north. This one was copyrighted in 1977. I'll show you a little preview of that little map. So, two great maps in here. This is a hardbound book. I'll show you. Oops. Sorry. Let me hold it shut. Hardbound book. Let's see what the actual cover looks like. Ooh. Ooh. Wow. It is quite striking, right? The inside jacket tells us that J.R.R. Tolkien was born on the 3rd of January, 1892. After serving in the First World War, he embarked on a distinguished academic career and was recognized as one of the finest philologists in the world. He is known as the creator of Middle-earth and author of the classic and extraordinary works of fiction, The Silmarillion, The Hobbit, and The Lord of the Rings. His books have been translated into 70 languages and have sold many millions of copies worldwide. He died on the 2nd of September 1973 at the age of 81. Christopher Tolkien, who was born on the 21st of November 1924, was the third son of J.R.R. Tolkien. During the Second World War, he served in the Royal Air Force and the Fleet Arm as a pilot. At the end of the war, he returned to Oxford University and became a fellow and tutor in English of the New College in 1964. He lectured in the University on early English and Northern literature. Appointed by J.R.R. Tolkien to be his literary executor, he devoted himself after his father's death in 1973 to the editing and publication of the unpublished writings, notably the Simarrillion, the Unfinished Tales, the 12 volumes collectively known as the History of Middle-earth, and the Children of Hurin, Beren and Luthien, and the Fall of the Gondolin. In 1975, he moved with his wife Bally to live in France, and in 2016 was awarded the University of Oxford's Bodley Medal for his outstanding contribution to the world of literature, culture, and science and communication. He died on the 16th of January 2020 at the age of 95. You can find them at www.tolkienestate.com. Oh, you can hear the rain coming in. I thought it was going to pause until this evening, but I know so many of you love the sound of the rain. I thought it would be a great backdrop for a beautiful outdoor book. Again, this is it so far. Let's dive in. I've taken the paper cover off and the maps out for safety. It does give you a lovely list of works by Tolkien. Tells you the works of J.R.R. Tolkien, works published posthumously, and then the History of Middle-earth by Christopher Tolkien as well. Let's see here. The copyright is 2022. The texts were first published in Great Britain in 1997 and by HarperCollins in 1992. The copyright started in 1997, but it's currently 2022. The maps are all copyrighted. Lots of lists where all the illustrations are in the library. Everything. Wow. Please note that the books may be purchased for educational, business, or sales or promotional use, so that's noted in here as well. Table of contents. Again, I could not look at this beforehand. I don't know. It's a bit mysterious to me. It starts out with introductory things, right? Telling us about the list of illustrations, the foreword, the preface to the second edition from a letter by J.R. Tolkien. We were promised that, and the notes on the illustrations. Then we begin with something called Ein Nulindale, and then Vala Quenta. It doesn't tell us any clues about what they are. And then we have in italics something entirely new. That's an odd section header, so I'm not sure what that is. Quenta Simarrillion. But then it should make more sense. It tells you what it's about. Okay? Of the beginning of days, of the coming of the elves, of the return of Noldor. So all of the chapters are of things like that. And then we have another section, another major one, right, of the rings. And then we have tables. So there appears to be a great deal here at the end as resources. So at the end we have tables. They are genealogies. We have 5 of them. The House of Finwë. Again, pronunciations are going to be off, or I don't know Elvish, and so I apologize. I don't know even general pronunciation, let alone all the extra symbols. The second table is the descendants of Olwe and Elwë. 3 is the House of Beor. 4 and 5 are the House of Hador and the people of Haleth. Then we have something called the Sundering of the Elves. Oh, here we go. Note on pronunciation. It doesn't tell us that until the end of the main table of contents. Notes on pronunciation are on 301, the index of names on 303, and then there's an appendix on elements in Quenya and Sindarin names. Okay, this would have been helped out by a better organized table of contents. Like these little notes, this should have been listed like appendixes. This should have been big like appendixes. These little things, like this part makes sense. These other things, this means This pretty much means nothing to me, some kind of explanation, even if it was just in the way of an outline format. I have no idea what those are. The illustrations are listed here as well. Now, remember I told you earlier, these are just the titles of them. The actual where they are labeled, which folios they are from and all in Oxford, is listed on the front inside cover part over here. It's over here where the table of contents begins. This is telling you where you can find those illustrations in the archives at Oxford. Ooh, there's quite a lot of them. There's 59 of them, and then there's another one. So that was the four, including 59 exclusive of those two maps we had. They're called, like, what's the first map is the front end sheet, and the second map was called the rear end sheet. I'm wondering if in some editions they aren't separate as ours were. I don't know. Just to note, at least in the preface sections, the page numbers are Roman numerals in the upper outside corners, as the name of the book is always on the left. That continues throughout, that it says the Simarrillion, and it tells us where we are, the individual chapter on the right-hand page in the upper. The numbering of the pages switches to Arabic numerals and continues in the upper outside corners. If you see a blank page as you're flipping through, it probably means there's a piece of art on the other side. Let's see what a chapter. I'm just doing some nerdy things, and then we'll get in and read just a smidge. I keep seeing those artwork, the blank pages, and thinking that's the beginning of a chapter. Here is what a beginning of a chapter looks like. So pretty easy to find because there's a big color symbol in this edition. It's marked out, some nice big bold words. I'm not seeing any footnotes. That is a thing he could do. There's so much in here. Let's go back and look at some of those tables in the back. How are they listed out? Tables. And here we have some little artwork here. This is something, again, I usually use those hard sticky tabs in these places. Not 100% sure I would in this particular classic edition, but maybe I would. I think temporarily I would put some of the flimsier ones that I know are going to more easily come off and see how much I use these features before I keep it. So these appear to be hand-drawn. I thought they were going to be typed out, so this is a surprise to see them done out by hand like this, or by a script that looks quite like handwritten. So the genealogies, they're not marked as genealogies once, oh, they are. So it's a little hard to see. That's not marked across the top, but they are. It's down here. Okay, so you're going to have to look for that, search for that a little bit in the text. It does get a little bit easier to see on that one. Notes on pronunciation. The following note is intended to simplify, to clarify, the following note is intended simply to clarify a few main features in the pronunciation of names in the Elvish languages, and by no means exhaustive. For fuller information on the subject, see the Lord of the Rings, Appendix E. So it tells us about consonants, the C, CH, DH, and G, and double consonants. And then we have vowels, AI, AU, EI, IE, UI, AE, EA, and EO, U with an accent mark, ER, IR, UR, and E. And it does tell you the circumflex accent and stressed monosyllables in Sindarian denotes the particularly long vowels heard in such words. Thus, I could not tell you. I cannot read any of that. I'm hoping that will make sense as I go along. If you're more familiar with the pronunciation, this is going to make sense to you. The index of names, it tells you since the number of names in this book is very large, the index provides, in addition to page references, a short statement concerning each person in place. The statements are not epitomes of all that is said in the text, and for most of the central figures in the narrative, are kept extremely brief, but such an index is inevitably bulky, and I've reduced its size in many ways. And this goes on. There's quite a description. So let's see what they mean. The name is in, they appear to be alphabetical. You can't probably make out on camera, but that is a dark blue. So the name is in dark blue. And then, so like Aden Edheel, Elfman is the name given to Turin in Nagarthrond, and the page is 200. So it's just written out with the page number at the end. There's no period there to let you know that that has ended. Just to note. I am noticing as I go along, there is a skinny little ribbon included in the book. It's a skinny little guy, and it's cut flat at the end. You can see it's already frayed, and I've only just opened the book. You saw me open it. So I'm going to cut that at an angle and put some fray check on it. But it is attached up here inside the book. And you can see there is a gap there if you want to do our usual style for adding ribbons. So maybe you don't want to put sticky tabs on here, but you would like ribbons for place various indexes in the back. That is something that you could do. We add that, friends. If you haven't seen me do that, it is using plastic craft canvas as a way to do it. You could use a cloth insert as well. It has to be stiff. That's why the plastic canvas works, and it has to be a certain thickness and all to get in there and not harm the book. Again, the canvas is flexible. It seems to work pretty well. I have that on other videos. And there are footnotes. In the notes on illustrations, there is a note. The humor of that. I kind of love that. Let's go through and read a little bit from the beginning, and then we'll do a little sample. There was the foreword. The Simarrillion, now published 4 years after the death of its author, is an account of the Elder Days, or the first age of the world. In The Lord of the Rings were narrated the great events at the end of the Third Age, but the tales of the Simarrillion are legends deriving from a much deeper past, when Morgoth, the first Dark Lord, dwelt in Middle-earth, and the High Elves made war upon him for the recovery of the Silmarils. Not only, however, does the Simarrillion relate the events of far earlier time than those of the Lord of the Rings, it is also, in all the essentials of its conception, far the earlier work. Indeed, although it was not then called the Simarrillion, it was already in being half a century ago, and in battered notebooks extending back to 1917 can still be read the earliest versions, often hastily penciled, of the central stories of the mythology. But it was never published, though some indication of its content could be gleaned from The Lord of the Rings. And throughout my father's long life, he never abandoned it, nor ceased, even in his last years, to work on it. In all that time, the Simarrillion, considered simply as a large narrative structure, underwent relatively little radical change. It became long ago a fixed tradition and background to later writings. But it was far indeed from being a fixed text, and did not remain unchanged even in certain fundamental ideas concerning the nature of the world it portrays. And while the same legends can be told in longer and shorter forms, and in different styles, as the years passed, the changes and variants, both in detail and larger perspectives, became so complex, so pervasive, and so many-layered that a final and definitive version seemed unattainable. Moreover, the old legends, old now not only in their derivation from the remote first age, but also in terms of my father's life, became the vehicle and depository of his profoundest reflections. In his later writing, mythology and poetry sank down behind his theological and philosophical preoccupations, from which arose incompatibilities of tone. On my father's death, it fell to me to try to bring the work into publishable form. It became clear to me that to attempt to present within the covers of a single book the diversity of materials to show the Simarrillion as in truth a continuing and evolving creation extending over more than half a century would in fact lead only to the confusion and submerging of what is essential. I set myself therefore to work out a single text, selecting and arranging in such a way as seemed to me to produce the most coherent and internally self-consistent narrative. In this work, the concluding chapters from the death of Turin Tirambor introduced peculiar difficulties, in that they had remained unchanged for many years, and were in some respects in serious disharmony with more developed conceptions of other parts of the book. I will leave you to read this, that he wrote in 1977. Now, in 1999, he wrote a shorter preface. This is to the second edition. probably towards the end of 1951, when The Lord of the Rings was completed, but difficulties lay in the way of its publication. My father wrote a really long letter to his friend Milton Waldman, at that time an editor at the publishing house at Collins. The context and occasion of this letter lay in the painful differences that arose over my father's insistence that the Simarrillion and the Lord of the Rings should be published in conjunction or in connection as one long saga of the jewels and the rings. There is, however, no need to enter into this matter here. The letter he wrote with a view justifying and explaining his contention emerged as a brilliant exposition of his conception of the earlier ages. The latter part of the letter, as he himself said, was no more than a long and yet bald resume of the narrative of The Lord of the Rings. And it is for this reason that I believe the merits inclusion within the covers of the Simarrillion, as is done in this edition. The original letter is lost, but Milton Waldman had a typescript made of it and sent a copy to my father. It is from this copy that the letter was printed, in part, in the Letters of J.R.R. Tolkien, 1981, number 131. The text given here is that in letters pages 143 to 157, with minor corrections and omissions of some of the footnotes. There were many errors in the typescript, especially in names. These are very largely corrected by my father, but he did not observe the sentence on page 23, Roman numeral. There was nothing wrong, essentially, in their lingering against counsel, still sadly with the mortal lands of their old heroic deeds. Here the typist will certainly omitted words in the manuscript, and perhaps misread those given as well. I have removed a number of errors in the text and index which until now have escaped correction in the hardback printings only of the Simarrillion. Chief among those are the concern that the numbering and sequence of certain of the rulers of Numenor, for example, for these errors and explanation of how they arose, see Unfinished Tales, 1980, page 226, note 11, and The Peoples of Middle-earth, 1996, page 154, section 31, Christopher Tolkien. And here we have the letter itself. It is dated in 1951. I'm going to lead you to read that on yourself. The note on the illustrations. Tolkien said of his Silmarillion mythology, which occupied him for most of his life, that it grew out of a desire to support languages he had created, and which he decided could not exist in a void, but to provide for his beloved England a body of heroic stories bound up with its tongue and soil. It was a majestic and ultimately highly complex effort, which began with poems he composed as a young man. The earliest of these, from September 1914, was The Voyage of the Arundel, the Evening Star. Inspired by a line from the Old English Christ, Ela Arundel Engla Bjorhast. I can't go on, I'm sorry. Hail Arundel, bravest of the angels, above Middle-earth, sent unto men. It was not at first connected to a larger literary scheme, but in time Arundel, in Sarah, which is written differently in Silmarillion, became a mariner who sails west from Middle-earth to seek the help of Valor, the greatest of the angelic powers, against Morgoth, the Lord of Darkness, and with a Simaril, one of the great jewels, maybe the elven artisan Fëanor, is set to sail in the sky as a star, a sign of hope to the oppressed. It goes on, friends. You're going to be very excited to read this. You can see how lovely the book is just by these introductions. But let us go randomly to a page. Let's go to the page that's marked by the bookmark. Why not? It is chapter 14 of Beleriand and its realms. This is the fashion of lands into which the Noldor came, in the north of the western regions in Middle-earth, in the ancient days, and here also is told of the manner in which the chieftains of the Eldar held their lands in the leaguer upon Morgoth after the Dagor Aglareb, the third battle in the wars of the Beleriand. In the north of the world, Melkor had in ages past reared Ered Engren, the Iron Mountains, as a fence to his citadel of Utumno, and they stood upon the boulders of the regions of everlasting cold, in a great curve from east to west. Behind the walls of Ered Engren, in the west, where they bent back northwards, Melkor built another fortress as a defense against assault that might come from Valinor, and when he came back to Middle-earth, as has been told, he took up from his abode in the endless dungeons of Angband the hells of iron, for in the wars of the powers of Valor, in their haste to overthrow him in his great stronghold in Utumno, they did not wholly destroy Angband, nor search out all its deep places. Beneath Ered Engren he made a great tunnel, which issued south of the mountains, and there he made a mighty gate. But above this gate, and behind it even to the mountains, he piled the thunderous towers of Thangorodirm. that were made of ash and slag of his subterranean furnaces and the vast refuge of his tunnelings. They were black and desolate, and exceedingly lofty, and smoke issued from their tops, dark and foul upon the northern sky. Before the gates of Angband, filth and desolation spread southward for many miles over the wide plain of Ardgallen. But after the coming of the sun, rich grass arose there, and while Angband was besieged and its gates shut, there were green things even among the pits and broken rocks before the doors of hell. This is a great day to curl up and read a great book, friends. I hope you enjoyed this preview. If you have any questions, please reach out. It's no doubt I'm keeping this book, obviously, so reach out away. God bless you, friends. See you later.